Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to the Spiritual Perspectives, a program that is geared towards our youth to provide them with deeper understanding of Islam and to face the challenges in this modern world. We are looking at Islamic spirituality, and we mentioned that there's three realities of one reality, which is Islam, Iman, and Ihsan. Iman is within Islam, and also Ihsan also within Islam. So one reality is really Islam, so which is divided into three different levels. Now, the reason we are looking at Islamic spirituality is because we in the West, or the Western phenomena of progress and development and civilization is more materialistic, and because of that we are facing issues, we are facing problems due to lack of spirituality. And and we also said that the development or advancement which we talk about, is it really that man landing on the moon or man landing on the Mars, or is it really that where we do not leave a poor walking on this earth, or where we do not leave a person who is illiterate or uneducated on this planet? Which really means that we are not against the advancement of technology or of man landing on the mission to Mars, but we are just trying to look at the priority of it. The saving of the planet Earth is of more value than colonizing moon. If we save the planet Earth, there is no need to colonize the moon. If we save the planet Earth, then there is no need to really mission to Mars. If this mission to Mars and colonization of moon is really costing our Earth, is really costing the destruction of ozone layer, then what good is that mission to Mars? So therefore, the lack of discerning which is a priority, the lack of understanding which really means development and advancement, sits upon the spiritual understanding of a person. As there is lack of spirituality in the West, they tend to think it is that way. So if there was spirituality existing, they would have definitely progressed in a different fashion. A Muslim scientist will never create a weapon that will take life. If the science was in the hands of the Muslims today, now the question is right, why it is not in the hands of Muslim? This is something to be asked, which we will look at it in our future programs. But just hypothetically speaking, if we just take it for an example, if it was in the hands of the Muslims today, the science, they will never create an atomic bomb that will destroy human life, because it is against spirituality. To take life, it is against spirituality. To take one innocent life on the basis of the Quran, it is as if taking all life of all of humanity. So therefore, a Muslim scientist will never engage in such a progress and development, such a development of such technology. A Muslim scientist will never engage in a technology or in an industry that will destroy the ozone layer, that will destroy the environment, that will dump its waste in the ocean, which will destroy the sea life, right? So why this is happening? Because we have lost it. We have lost the spiritual life. So now Islam tends to provide with that. There's an outward reality of Islam, which we talk about Islam, and the Quran says to tell, O Prophet, that those who have brought Islam, they haven't really brought Iman yet. So when they bring Islam meaning that when they accept Islam, then they must really accept it with their heart, which means by iman, to have that belief within it. A person this example is usually given, a person who is asked to sleep with a dead person in a room at night and when it's dark, he might be a doctor who himself have pronounced death to that person, pronounced death to that person, but in terms of the iman, he might be too scared to be there, So that means what he has signed for, as he has pronounced that person dead, it hasn't really entered his heart. He really thinks that, he might wake up or he might do something, So iman is something that goes inside. Then after that you have ihsan, which really means virtue, which also means the beauty of the soul, is in fact the goal, which really Islam wants, that it beautify the soul through virtue, through practice, through a particular sort of methodology, that a person reaches that, the practice of the sunnah. He practices it with consciousness, and this tend to become within the Islamic sort of civilization, which is known as Sufism. Those who are the people of the path, of the tariqah or turuq. And this itself is quite fascinating, that we find within Islam that a whole group of great scholars who did have contributed, this provides to that diversity. Diversity is always beautiful. Unfortunately, we tend to be very afraid and insecure of diversity. But diversity is the creation of God, which really makes it more beautiful. Imagine a carpet, a Persian rug, which have different colors, different shapes, and different forms, is more beautiful than a sort of like a plain carpet, a plain rug, a plain rug compared to a Persian rug. Why a Persian rug is beautiful? Because it's the diversity that is there. So diversity is really beautiful, and one must really appreciate that diversity. So even within Islam, when we find theologians, when we find the fuqaha, when we find the urafa, you have the Sufi, and you have the Sufi tariqas, different diverse sort of practices that is existing. This points out to that richness of that very maktab. This points out to that richness of that very religion, that it has provided a sense of belonging, a sense of peace, a sense of tranquility on its own level to them, on whatever level they are. There are different levels of understanding. There are different levels of the heart. Some people, they just outwardly accept Islam and they make themselves busy in practicing what they are, and they sincerely practice and they are satisfied with it. But there are certain people who would like to engage themselves on a deeper level, and they come up with fascinating ideas, with fascinating facts, which really provides them that sense of servitude, that sense of spirituality in what they have discovered. Where? They have discovered within Islam. Where they have discovered? Within the teachings of the Prophet. Where they have discovered this? Within the Sunnah of the Prophet. That's why, they feel attached. So, diversity is pointing out to the beauty, and it is pointing out to the richness of that deen, of that maktab. That's why Imam Sadiq engaged and entertained discussions on different levels. He would engage discussing with atheists, and he would fully allow them to express their thought and their ideology without being offended. Unfortunately, what we see today is that Muslims, when it comes to certain criticism, they tend to become very offended. There's no need to be offended. This is not the practice of the scholars. This is not the practice of our imams. This is not the practice of the Prophet. Prophet appreciated everything. Prophet allowed people to practice freely what they are practicing. Prophet provided them with that space, and they practiced that. And as a matter of fact, if we take the turuq or the path of the fuqaha, this will become, for those who can understand this is considered as a ijma. This is ijma muhassel. If one wants to go into that usuli terminology, this will be considered as a ijma muhassel. Ijma muhassel is consensus. Consensus of muhassel means that which is hasil, which means that a consensus of the companions or of the time of the Prophet or the imams, right? Which becomes hujjat, which becomes a proof for a usuli or for a mujtahid or for a marja to really pass a verdict. So, not to get into those technical details, what I'm trying to provide you here is diversity is really a blessing, and it really points out to that richness of deen, of Islam, of religion, and one must be really appreciating that rather than being critical of it. Criticism on the polemic level, it's good. That is a science in itself. On that theology level, well and good. That is a science in itself. But at the same time, the approach of Muslims and the approach of our youth towards the deen, towards the religion, should be all encompassing. Islam is the way of life, like we said earlier. Islam is not something that we are practicing. Yes, we are practicing something, but this is the way of life, which includes everything as well. You see? And that is betterment for humanity and for the society. And if someone who doesn't want to accept, that is fine. That's what I always say, that Bernard Shaw or somebody who have said that in the West he has seen Muslims but not Islam, and in the East he has seen Islam but not Muslims. See, the West, on whatever level of sense of humanity that they have, human rights, so on and so forth, to a greater extent, one really appreciates that. The freedom of practice of religion in the West, the freedom of expression, the equality that exists among different people, the right to express, the right to vote, so on and so forth, that we find in the West. It's all, one really appreciate that. The qawaneen, the laws that they are, the quality control, all of these things are very good, and they are beneficial for mankind. But unfortunately, what the West have done is that they haven't really considered looking religion in the first place, because West means, or because today modern postmodern period really means that religion is something outdated. So we don't have to really investigate anything about religion. Religion doesn't know anything. That's number one. This is something that the West have used it as a principle from in schools, in colleges, in universities, in workplace, everywhere. This is the principle that religion is outdated, right? So we don't really have to investigate anything about religion, number one. The second is Islam. Islam, what are you talking about? Islam and human rights? No way. 2 witness of a woman is needed compared to 1. The wife will inherit this much. The daughter will inherit half of the share. This is not equality. just on the outward face of Islam, they have rejected Islam. They haven't really looked deep and understood what really Islam means. Leave aside the West. The Muslims, they themselves haven't. They themselves are unaware of the family law. They are unaware of the beauties of Islam that exist. What are you talking about the West here? So what I'm trying to point out here is that the postmodern period, they have contributed towards humanity, towards equality, towards human rights, but they've been biased at the same time. They have thrown religion out, and as they have completely thrown religion out under the pretext of it being outdated, they thought that they have progressed, they have developed, they have advanced to provide equality in the society, but still there is injustice existing in the world. Why is that? Because there are issues with the intention, there are issues in terms of the calculation, there are issues in terms of the deduction, of law, right? Because they have thrown out a canon which is really the source of true humanity. That is religion and that is Islam, right? That's why we see chaos today. That's why we see imbalance today. So if any philosopher in the West understand Deen Islam, understand religion deeply, then they will not face these issues that they are facing. Now, returning back onto what we were saying, Islam, Iman and Ihsan. Ihsan is really that path, that spiritual path, that spiritual journey, that tariqah, that Sufi sort of way that we see within Islam. Having said that, other schools also have spirituality within themselves. Like for example, in Sunnism, you do have spirituality to a certain extent, but not onto that deep level where you find that in Sufism. So for within the Sunni schools, where you have the Shafi'i, Maliki, Hanbali, and Hanafi, these schools, Shafi'i, Maliki, Hanbali and Hanafi, right? If you want to look at the spiritual path, the tariqah, they will indicate or point towards Sufism. So you will have a Shafi'i outwardly, as in Islam, practicing, but within the tariqah, he might be following a Qadariyya tariqah, Abdul Qadir Jilani, for example. You might have a Maliki as an outward fiqh or as an outward practice in terms of their religion, in terms of their deen, but within the ihsan or the virtue or the tariqah that they are following, it could be, Naqshbandi, for example, or Shadaliya, or many of these different tariqahs that exist, right? But within the Shia school, for them, the Shariat is Aina Tariqat. The Shariat is that very essential path, is that very spiritual methodology that exists, and that is within. So for a great theologian or theosopher or philosopher, if you want to call, Sheikh Haydar Amali, a famous sort of spiritual master, once he had mentioned, to be a Shia is to be Sufi, and to be a Sufi is to be a Shia. What he wanted to say actually is that, Sufism, which is considered as the spiritual path within the Sunni school, but within Shiaism, that is the path itself. A Shia is a spiritual person. A Shia is really, if you want to call Sufi, quote unquote. You know what I mean? From that point of view, from that spiritual point of view. So, for a Maliki, he has to go look out for a tariqah which is Qadari. However, the Abdul Qadir Jilani, he himself might be a follower of Imam Hanbal. But within the Shia, he doesn't have to go look for different tariqas, but he will be following his Imam himself. And as a matter of fact, all of the Sufi tariqas, they all end up with Amirul Mu'mineen, with Ali ibn Abi Talib. He is the champion of all Sufi masters, or he's the masters of the master. He's the master of the masters in Sufism, in spirituality. All tariqas goes back to him. So within the Shia thought, or within the Shia school, they already have Imam Ali as the first Imam, in terms of that spirituality. So his teaching, his practices, which is the ahkam of ours, itself becomes that spiritual practice of ours, right? And then obviously the sayings of the Imams, the teachings of the Imams, the du'as, within the Sufi tariqa, you have two sort of different categories. One is that theoretical irfan or Sufism, and then you have the practical aspect. The theoretical aspect talks about the wahdaniyat, about the existence of God, and then the practical aspect is the practices that they have, right? So now within the Shia thought, or Shia school of thought, you have that sublime and the ultimate knowledge, marifat, understanding of the oneness of God, of Tawheed, in the teachings of Ahl Bayt alayhimus salam, and then at the same time you have that extreme practice, that extreme in the sense, extreme meaning that in-depth practice of the Masumeen and their teachings, how to really carry oneself, how to really function in order that one becomes spiritual in terms of his life. So now the virtue or ihsan points out to that beauty, points out to that inner path that in Islam that one follows. So Islam provides with an outward reality for a person, then it also provides with that faith, that sort of purgatory, or that not purgatory, that sort of barzaqi, reality, which is the iman. Then you have the ihsan, which is the innermost reality. Now within this field of Islamic spirituality, you find amazing universe of different spiritual masters. Well, we are not here to discuss who is right and who is wrong in that sense of the right and wrong and in the black and white reality. We are talking about the spiritual bed. We are talking about the spiritual richness. We are talking about the spiritual color that Islam have given in different forms, in different tariqas, from Imam Ghazali, from Abdul Qadir Jilani, from Naqshbandi, from different sort of, you have the Indo-Pak version of Sufism, Khaja Ajmeri, you have the Chinese reality, you have the African, you have the Malaysian, you have all of these sort of different colors, different beauties within the universe of Islamic spirituality. This is richness. This is fascinating. This is really amazing. One should really think of that. One should really step out. Yes, we have our belief system. We are Shias, we believe in one God, we believe in 12 Imams, we believe in the Quran, Ma'at, so on and so forth, Usul ad-Din, Furu-d-Din, that is okay. But just come out of that and look at the beauty of Islam. Look at the beauty of Islam, where within that you have the spiritual universe. How beautiful and how rich it is. How many thirsty individual, it has quenched their thirst. They all drank from that stream of spirituality of Islam. And the foundation of this spiritual stream is no one but Ali ibn Abi Talib, is no one but Amirul Mu'mineen, who is the master of all masters. When you talk about Abdul Qadir Jilani, Amirul Mu'mineen. When you talk about Ibn Arabi, Amirul Mu'mineen. When you talk about Naqshbandi, Amirul Mu'mineen. Everybody is towards that, right? So it's really fascinating to really see the spiritual universe. Obviously, after this spiritual, Islamic spirituality, then comes the discussions of Islamic theology, kalam. It's not just spiritual, right? It is all encompassing. It is encompassing all different facets and different forms and different types of knowledge. And in every field, it points out to that kamal. It points out to that perfection. Then you have in the sciences of theology, theologians, amazing theologians, who have talked and who have discussed. And within the leader of all theologian, the first mutakallim to be known and to be renowned, the founder of that, who have discussed kalam and theology, once again, we look at, he is known as Ali ibn Abi Talib. May blessings and peace be upon him. Thank you very much for being with us, and we hope to see you next week again. We will continue from kalam, from theology. We are looking at Islamic spirituality and thought, how Islam is so rich that it has provided to many different sciences where they have quenched their thirst, and it still provides. Inshallah, we hope to see you next week again. Good night from Spiritual Perspectives.